After listening to this episode, I promise you that you will know more than 99% of the world about nutrition, calories, and weight loss. We're getting into it all today. So grab a coffee, grab something to take some notes, and let's get into it. Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Listen, now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because I believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I am so grateful and I'm genuinely so humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. Today, I'm going to teach you so much about calories, about weight loss, about fat loss, about nutrition, about what to eat, when to eat, all that stuff. By the end of this episode, you're going to know more than 99% of the world about how to lose weight and all that comes with it, okay? So in today's episode, we're going to focus on the 3 pillars that every man needs to know about on his journey of fat loss, all right? We're going to talk about the struggle. We're going to talk about the science. And we're going to talk about the strategy, okay? The struggle is all about our environments, challenges, why we keep falling off the wagon. The science is the actual science behind fat loss, behind calories, behind macronutrients. And the strategies are just real practical things you can do to get things into place in your life, to get the big rocks in place so you can start losing weight if that's your goal. Let's just start this off by saying the fitness industry is pretty broken. If you talk to any fitness influencer, they would agree that the same thing, that there's polarizing opinions everywhere you look. There are people out there saying that, vegetables are wrong. Vegetables are going to kill you. There are people out there saying that animal proteins are going to kill you. You got to go vegan only. And then there are people it's absolutely bonkers out there, right? I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty. I'm going to talk about the big rocks, as I said, the things that do not change, the universal truths when it comes to calories and exercise and all that stuff. And so I'm not going to talk about specific supplements, specific workout styles, specific on all that stuff. I'm just going to speak about what I know to be true, what we can all agree on, okay? Just for the sake of today's episode. I'm going to make this simple and clear as possible for you in as short time as possible. Now, before we jump into it, I'll explain a little bit about my journey with weight loss and fitness in the past. I yo-yoed for years. And when I say yo-yoed, I mean I would go hard in the gym and I'd eat clean, and then something would happen and then I'd fall off the wagon and my diet would go out the window. I'd stop working out and then I'd gain weight. I mean, I would fluctuate anywhere between like 180 to 240 pounds. I mean, we're talking about like a 60-pound swing, over the course of, 2-3 years. And then I'd start a new cycle. And so it was very unhealthy for a long time. The one thing I was consistent in was working out, because I always really enjoyed that release, that the adrenaline, the endorphins that came from a good workout. But I could never get my diet on track. And that's why today we're going to talk about diet and calories and nutrition, because that's at least 80% of your journey. And that's why I couldn't seem to get it right, because I was constantly training. I was constantly working out, but I couldn't get my diet right. I was always focusing 100% of my effort on what was getting me 20% of my results, instead of focusing most of my effort on what was getting me 80% of my results, what should have been my diet. And maybe in a future episode, we can talk about resistance training, cardio, all that kind of stuff. But for now, we're going to focus on the 80%. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a little before and after photo. Now this, I posted this on Instagram a little while ago, and this was when I was at rock bottom. Our marriage was hanging on by a thread. We were in a ton of consumer debt. I was about 240 pounds in this photo. Now, I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'9" on a good day. And so 240 is heavy, for a guy my size. And so that was the day after it all hit the fan. And that was the day that I said, the next day when I got up, I said, enough is enough. I'm going to take control of my life. I'm going to take control of my fitness. I'm going to take control of my finances. I'm going to take control of this family and really do the work that I need to do to get things underway and to restore all of these broken things in my life. And so the fitness journey, that was where it started for me, where I started really taking it seriously. Then I started digging into personal fitness. I started digging into exercise and nutrition on a whole like mad scientist level. And that was 7 years ago. And so here we are today. And so I show you these photos, not to say, oh, look at me, look at what I was able to accomplish. I show you these photos just to simply prove, hey, I've done this, I do this, I understand this. The second part I want to say when it comes to this photo is that I don't look like this year round. And this is a part of the reason why there's a bit of an issue with the fitness industry, is because a lot of people look at this picture on the right and say, well, that's what I should look like all the time. But keep in mind, I think I was like 6.8% body fat at that point. I mean, it's very healthy to be at like 11, 12% body fat. That is a very healthy body fat range. To get down to, 8, 7, 6% body fat takes an incredible amount of sacrifice. And yes, it's an incredible accomplishment, but it's not where I live year round. So don't look at that photo and think I need to look like that aesthetically. Does that make sense? Please don't hold yourself to that standard, because I certainly don't hold myself to that standard. I mean, I'm about 10 pounds heavier than that on average around the year. Now, I'll cut down for the summer. I'll cut down for different things that I have going on. But that's essentially the truth here. Okay, so don't get it twisted. So I say all of that to say, if you're listening to this and you have more weight than you would like, got a little extra weight on, I know how you feel. All right, I've been there. I get it. If you struggle with food, if you struggle with saying no, I get it. I've been there. If you find it all paralyzing because there's so much information and there's so much advice out there that you don't know where to begin, I get it. I've been there. Okay. So that's why I'm here to share what I know with you today. So let's talk about it. Number one, the struggle. Why do we have such a difficult time with eating too much? Eating emotionally, not being able to control our diet. Why is that? And it's simply because eating is emotional for most people. And it's important that we understand our emotional relationship with food. And if you're like me and millions of other people in the world, you've asked yourself this question: why is it so hard to lose weight and keep it off? I mean, this is a $1 trillion industry. Why can't I seem to change my habits when it comes to eating? All right, so let's get into it. Your body, okay? Your body is a fine-tuned machine, and it is incredibly good at adapting to what you feed it and when you feed it. We often think about what we eat, but we don't often think about when we eat or how we eat that affects our bodies. And your body will automatically adjust, like slow down or speed up its metabolism, and it will produce appetite-stimulating hormones and chemical messengers. And so it can also signal our body to store calories we eat more efficiently. And this makes weight loss more difficult. So here are 6 things that people do, pretty common things, that make weight loss a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. So number 1, they skip breakfast. But for the average person, when they skip breakfast, this will often lead to binging at lunch, because you're just going to go out of control because you're so hungry. So a good practical principle is to eat with something within 2 hours of waking. This could be as simple as a piece of fruit, slice of toast, some protein source, maybe a morning coffee and water. Number 2, people go for long stretches without eating. I have a friend who's overweight, and they would often say, "But I only eat once a day. Like, how do I still have this weight if I'm only eating once a day?" When defending themselves. But remember, your body is a finely tuned machine, and it will slow your metabolism and slow your calorie burning process because it doesn't know when it's going to eat again. So essentially it goes into power saving mode, right? So how do you avoid this? Don't go longer than 4 hours without eating. The trick is not to skip meals and to only eat once a day, because your metabolism will slow down. The third concept is following a restrictive and a low calorie diet. Now, this can be really tricky because for the average person, they're not going to handle this well. Kind of like the first point. It's going to lead to fatigue, to irritability, to decreased concentration. You're constantly thinking about food, and this starvation, of calories will eventually end up in binge eating. If you're like me, You've been there, and like you work so hard, and before you know it, you just give up and you go out and binge, and you just totally derail all of your progress. Number 4, chronic stress. This has got to be, oh man, this is a huge one. When you have stress in your body goes into fight or flight mode, and people live in this mode, right? The body produces more cortisol, which is your survival hormone. But here's the thing, cortisol will cause your body to store calories, right? So stress management is critical in the management of your overall health, not just physically, but psychologically, emotionally, all that stuff. But you want to lower the levels of cortisol because your body is in fight or flight, like I said, and it just says, I don't know when I'm going to eat again. I'm in danger. I'm going to store this fat for when I need it. Number 6, and probably the most important, is a lack of sleep. This is one of the most abused things, our sleep, out there, right? But there's a direct correlation between sleep deprivation and weight challenges. When you're tired, you're far less likely to want to get exercise, right? You have little energy to make wholesome meals, and you're going to find it way more difficult to make the right decisions due to fatigue. So the solution is to simply try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Your body's going to need energy from somewhere. So by undersleeping, you're waking up in an energy deficit. So your body's going to naturally try to supplement that energy deficit by eating more, okay? So get your sleep. All right, moving on to the second point, our behaviors. So when two things are paired together repeatedly, we develop relationships between the two. You've probably heard of the story of Pavlov and his study with the dogs. Well, if you haven't, just research it. It's all about what he learned by having dogs and tempting them with food and treats and watching them salivate. Essentially, what happens is we develop subconscious triggers and cravings when we pair two things together. So for example, movies and popcorn, right? One of my friends who's a smoker associated smoking with driving. First thing he would do after starting his car and buckling up was light a smoke. Now, he could have even sat in the car and not gone anywhere, but it was something about these actions that developed triggers that would make him want to smoke. The second he put on his seatbelt, the second he started the car, put the car in drive, he needed to light a cigarette. Another great example of this, if you have a dog, is a dog and his leash. To a puppy, the leash means nothing. But over time, when he hears the rattling of the leash, he begins to associate that with outside, with exploring, smelling, walking. So just simply hearing the rattle of the leash can change the dog's state emotionally. So in this scenario, the leash would be the trigger, and getting excited is a learned response. So for example, in the context of, eating, a lot of people have to have something sweet after dinner, right? Because we've created a learned response. Finishing the meal is the trigger, and dessert is the response. On that note, we have to be careful about, if you have kids and you're listening, you have to be careful about how we're teaching our kids about food, right? And the behaviors they're developing. Because when our kid comes home from school and they had a bad day, parents will often comfort their child with a cookie or sweet treat of sorts, right? Now, what you need to understand is that this is going to lead to a learned behavior if done too frequently. So what's going to happen is with time, a child is going to associate feeling sad with getting treats or eating sweets. Now, you might not like this, but for the majority of the people, this is when the bond of emotional eating takes place, is as we're children. You may even notice that you still crave the same foods you did as a child. And that's kind of what happened to me. Specifically, chocolate. When I had a bad day, I'd have a cookie, And as an adult, I had to intentionally break that bond of turning to like Reese's peanut butter cups when I had a bad day. Because feelings are connected to food, which we're going to talk about. Right? Then that leads into the third category, which is your environment. All right? Your body, your behaviors, your environment. Now, understanding our environment plays a huge role in understanding how we make better decisions when it comes to our diet. Okay? Here's why. Number 1, we're stuck in fast forward. Okay? Most people don't take the time to sit down, let alone take the time to plan a healthy meal, because we have this combination of a hectic lifestyle and readily available fast food, and this combination makes it real difficult to manage your calories, right? Number 2, food is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's tough to control cravings when you're surrounded by temptation. Food isn't just in the grocery stores anymore. It's at hardware stores, it's at fuel stations, it's on your phone. Like every corner has a corner store with treats in it. Number 3, food makes for great marketing, right? Think about it. Your billboards, social media. I mean, we are being bombarded with pictures and videos of stringy, cheesy pizza, juicy cheeseburgers, crisp, cold beer, and so much more every minute of the day. Like billions of dollars of marketing go into this per year so that you give into the temptation. I mean, they're banking on it, right? Number 4, bigger is better. One word for you, Costco, all right? It's cheaper to buy in bulk, and it is. I mean, you're not wrong. I think about this all the time. Quantity over quality for me. I'm always looking for the biggest bang for my buck. But studies have shown that when the packaging gets larger, people tend to eat anywhere from 18 to 35% more. So if the jar of peanut butter is bigger, you're going to eat more peanut butter. Now, we may be saving dollars, but we aren't saving in calories. Number 5, we love a good deal, right? 2 for the price of 1. This is a fantastic, timeless, great marketing trick. Whether it's manipulated prices to make an illusion of a deal or the clever presentation of 2 different sizes, when we buy more, the only person that wins is the seller. Because I'm sorry to break it to you, but if you buy 2 slices of pizza for the price of 1, it doesn't mean that you save money. It just means you ate twice as much as you needed to. Number 6, extra large options. All right, especially in North America, there's always options to size up. Take a look at the cup holders in our cars. Over the past 15 years, they've doubled in number and they've become much larger to accommodate such large cups. Take a look at the cars from the 80s and look at how many cup holders there are and the size of the cup holders. Very, very different. We see it all around us. Number 7, optical illusions. Okay, the bigger plates, the bigger cups, the bigger bowls we have, the more we eat. Why? Because the bigger the plate, the less food it looks like is on the plate. So the more we can pile on. Again, same thing applies here. Look at plates and cups from the 50s and 60s. They're much smaller. Like they were the size of our dessert plates these days. So what's the solution? Get smaller plates, right? Think about that. Now that we've talked about our environments that we're currently in, also the environments that we were raised in also heavily affect our relationship with food, right? So here are some questions that I want you to consider to help you make sense of why you might be triggered by food as an adult now, originating perhaps from your culture or your childhood. Like I said, these are going to illuminate potential points where we were shaped by our environments to overindulge. Here are some questions. How does your culture celebrate? Do they celebrate with food? And how often? Another one, were you raised to fear wasting food or to finish your plate? Were you ever told not to spoil your supper with snacks? Were any of your family members constantly on a diet when you were growing up? And if they were, what kind of diet were they on? Or was struggling with weight management a problem in your home growing up? Or was food used as a reward? Were you rewarded a cookie when you came home because you had a bad day? And the last one, was food withheld as a punishment? Okay, so we talked about 3 big factors, right? Our body, our behaviors, and our environments that really kind of work against us. Now I'm going to bring 3 types of hunger to the table here that I want you to consider. This is something that I learned, 3-4 years ago that really helped me get control over my hunger. And it's a way of just doing an assessment every time you eat. Essentially, there are 3 types of hunger that you need to know about, okay? There's stomach hunger, mouth hunger, and heart hunger. These are the 3 ways that I categorize it, okay? So the first one is stomach hunger. It's pretty obvious. This is simply the physical need for food. You know, it happens when it's been 5 or 6 hours since you've eaten and your stomach begins to growl. Stomach hunger can also be when you need to eat because of a medical condition such as low blood sugar. Stomach hunger causes you to eat for your well-being, okay? Number 1. Number 2, mouth hunger. Have you ever found yourself standing in front of the pantry or the fridge looking for something but not sure what, right? You might think, I want something salty or something creamy or something sweet. You're craving a certain taste or a texture or a smell. Perhaps you want some ice cream or potato chips. This is where you simply crave the pleasure of food. This is a mouth hunger, right? Like mouth feel. And the third is heart hunger. Now, this type of hunger is triggered by your emotions. It's when you've had a hard day. It's when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed. It's a mental challenge, not a physical one, right? So heart hunger can also lead to a learned behavior around food or eating, like we discussed earlier. In almost every situation, the majority of the time people eat who struggle with food and eating emotionally, they're eating because of response to heart hunger. This is an important thing to observe because it means we're not eating out of necessity. We're eating because of our emotions. So we must identify our emotional relationship with food and pinpoint the challenges. Does that make sense? So that was overall number one, right? The struggle, why it is we struggle with overeating. I want you to save this episode, go back and write out these notes and start thinking about this for yourself. How you were raised, different triggers you've developed around food, different times when you eat, all that kind of stuff. And really if you're here and you're struggling with weight, this is going to be really helpful, you guys, okay? Number two, we're going to get into the science, okay? Now, this is the science of losing fat. Now, we talk about, I said this earlier, like at least 85% of your fitness results will come from your diet and your nutrition, which is your eating habits, while only like 15% of your progress comes from working out, right? This phrase I heard years ago, it's so true. Your body is built in the kitchen and sculpted in the gym. It's built in the kitchen and sculpted in the gym. So knowing this is why we're spending a bunch of the time on nutrition and diet today, because why not focus on what's going to give you 80% of your results instead of spending a whole hour talking about something that's going to give you like 20% or 15% or less, right? And while we're on this point, so many people go to the gym to work and they work out to lose weight. It's like they were gluttonous over the weekend and they ate way too much. And they say, well, I got to go to the gym to lose weight. The amount of calories you burn in a weight training session or cardio session are minimal. They're fractional compared to how much you consume, right? And which we're going to get into. But I want you to change how you think about the gym, because you should never go to the gym to lose weight, to punish yourself for eating too much. You need to get it. That's called majoring on the minors, all right? We need to major on the majors, which is our diet, right? Control how many calories we're consuming. So on that topic, what is a calorie? A calorie is simply a unit of energy, specifically heat, right? Hence the term burning calories. It's a unit of heat. We use calories to measure energy created and energy burnt, right? Our body produces energy by processing the food we eat, right? Processing these calories. And that food we eat can be broken down into macronutrients, which we're going to talk about. Everything we eat can be broken down into those macros, which is fats, carbs, protein, right? Now, our body processes these nutrients and turns them into energy or fuel, okay? A calorie is the simple tool we use to gauge how much energy we are creating or how much fuel we're creating to burn, okay? So you can apply this in an automotive context, for example. I used to be a mechanic, right? So this makes sense to me. But the gas in the tank of our cars can be equated to the calories that we consume in a day. You can put clean gas in your car. You can put old gas, dirty gas. You see, the quality of what you put in your tank determines how efficiently your body or your engine will run. Now, if you put more fuel in your tank than you burn, which would be the equivalent of overeating, you'll have more weight in your car, right? Which will be the unburned fuel or the extra fat. As you burn more fuel, your car will physically lose weight as it's burning the fuel in the car, or in your body will lose fat. The simple truth is that if you eat more calories than you burn in a day, you will gain fat, right? You will gain weight. If you have more fat than you would like on your body, it's because you are eating more calories than you're burning. That's it. That's science. There's no getting around it, all right? There's no hack to it. If you eat less calories, but you burn more calories, your body will lose fat or weight. So for example, if you eat 2,000 calories a day, but you burn 2,500 calories per day, you're in a deficit of 500 calories. And that's a significant deficit. But here's why it's not that simple. It's because it's important to note the source of these calories can be very, very different, okay? Just like the fuel that we put in our cars. So for example, 5 ounces of chicken breast, 1 cup of rice and broccoli is like 500 calories, okay? 1 large fries from McDonald's is 560 calories. Now ask yourself, if you were to sit down and eat 1 large fries from McDonald's, or you were to sit down and eat a chicken breast, a cup of rice, and a bunch of broccoli, which is going to be more satiating? Which is going to give you more nutrients? Obviously, I think we would all agree the chicken, the rice, and the broccoli. Now, I'm oversimplifying to prove a point. One is going to give you almost 50 grams of protein, and it's going to be a great amount of fiber, and it's going to give you some clean, healthy carbs, while the other gives you 6 grams of protein, mostly saturated fat, leaving you thirsty and wanting to eat more. So if you want to have more energy, to be more satiated and have less cravings, it's clear that the source of the calories matter. It's not always as simple as saying calories in, calories out. We need to understand the source of the calories. That's why quality of food is important. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the episode, like when we talk about ultra-processed foods versus whole foods, and why it's more beneficial to think about eating clean, whole foods. Continue on this topic of calories. Roughly speaking, 1 pound of body fat is the equivalent to 3,500 calories, okay? So if you want to lose 1 pound of body fat, your body has to burn 3,500 calories. I'm going to use some basic math for you. Now, so for example, if you want to lose 10 pounds, that means that you need to create a deficit of 35,000 calories, whether it's through burning calories through working out or simply going through a caloric restriction. So now we're going to take that deficit and we're going to divide it by how long we want to take to reach that goal. So say, for example, it's 90 days. So 3 months, okay? 10 pounds and 3 months. Now we're going to divide. We know that we need to be in a deficit of 35,000 calories. We're going to say 35,000 divided by 90 days equals a 388 calorie per day deficit. Okay? So now we can break this down. We can simplify. We could say we need to burn or not intake 388 calories per day. And in theory, in 3 months, we'll be 10 pounds lighter. Now, of course, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. You know, there's going to be plateaus. There's going to be, you know, if you have like hormonal imbalances, you know, macros, all that kind of stuff has to come into consideration. However, at its simplest level, that's it. So when you step on the scale and you're 5 pounds heavier, that doesn't necessarily mean that you gained 5 pounds in like fat. I mean, that would be outrageous. That would be 3,500 calories times 5. I mean, that would be very, very difficult. While we're on that topic, weighing in can be either encouraging or incredibly discouraging, okay? So here's my tip for people when they weigh in, because your body can fluctuate anywhere between 4 to 5 pounds on any point during the day. So if you're wanting to lose weight, I want you to consistently weigh in the same time every single day. Okay, or the same time, you know, Monday and Friday. So what that looks like is when you wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom, and then weigh yourself in. Okay, this is going to be, you know, your body's coming out of a bit of a fasted state because you haven't eaten for 7 or 8 hours, but this is going to be your most accurate depiction of your weight. Now, don't compare that weight to any weight that's taken later on in the day, because your body's taking in sodium, it's taking on water, you know, all those different things. And so you could be 5 pounds heavier at the end of the day. So don't compare your 9 a.m. weight with your 9 p.m. weight. Be consistent, right? So there's a couple things you can do. I weigh in Monday morning and Friday morning. Monday morning, Friday morning. Same time, I get up, use the bathroom, weigh myself. Or you could do it 5 times a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then take the average of your 5 days of weigh-ins. That's going to give you the most accurate depiction of your body weight, okay? So don't be discouraged if you weigh in and you're 5 pounds heavier, because that is absolutely normal. All right, we're almost through the heady stuff, okay? I'm going to talk about the 4 buckets of calorie burning. Now, some of you are going to love this. Some of you are going to be like, this is too geeky for me. Number 1 is called your RMR, which is your resting metabolic rate, okay? This accounts for 50 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. This is simply breathing, blinking, thinking, anything that your body does subconsciously to keep you alive, okay? This is just simply existing. Your RMR, or your resting metabolic rate, accounts for could be 50 to 70% of your daily energy expenditure. The second of the 4 is called your TEF, which is your thermal effect of food. This accounts for 5 to 10% of your daily energy expenditure. Now, this is essentially what the energy your body burns to process the food, okay? So when you eat protein, your body per calorie, it uses a certain amount of energy simply to process the calories that comes in, right? So that's the thermal effect of food. Number 3 is your physical exercise, okay? This is intentional, purposeful activity. So walking, working out, running, etc. I mean, this can account for 10 or so % of your energy expenditure. And the last one, 4, is called NEAT, okay? This is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, this is unintentional body movement, okay? Or unintentional body like exercise. And so what this means is when people eat a big meal, sometimes their bodies spontaneously start to fidget, right? So for example, you start shaking your leg or tapping your fingers, or sometimes you'll just start to sweat, right? This is your body's way of subconsciously burning off the energy you just consumed. So the calorie burn from NEAT can be up to 1,000 calories per day for people with high levels of NEAT. Now, it has to be unconscious, like you're not thinking about it. The second you say you're going to go for a walk, that becomes exercise. But if you just start spontaneously shaking your legs after a big meal, that's NEAT, right? You can't control it. So these 4 buckets, RMR, TEF, activity, like your exercise, and NEAT, combine to allow you to calculate your total energy expenditure for the day, right? Now, on the topic of burning calories, like I mentioned macros, right? So a lot of people use the term macros. I'm tracking my macros. This doesn't fit my macros, blah, blah, blah. If you're confused about that, that's okay. So was I, right? But as I said, when people say all calories are the same, yes, it's true, because calories are simply a unit of measurement. And that's like saying all seconds on the clock are the same, which is true. But the source of the calorie, as I said, is important to understand. Is the calorie you're consuming predominantly a protein or fat or carb, right? Now, everything you eat is some combination of fats, carbs, and protein, okay? I'm going to break all 3 down real quick for you. So protein. Of all the macronutrients, protein is definitely the biggest lever you can pull. It's so important that you prioritize protein. Why? Because protein is the most satiating macronutrient, right? It's going to make you feel the most full. That's what that means. It helps with muscle growth and recovery. And it also has the highest thermal effect of food. Remember, we just talked about the TEF. That means your body burns more calories processing protein than any of the other macros. The thermal effect of protein is about 20 to 30%. What that means is if you eat 100 calories of protein, your net calories after your body processes that protein is only 70 to 80 calories, which is incredible, right? When you think about that. So those are a couple of reasons why it's important to prioritize protein. Number 2 is carbohydrates. Now, like fat, carbohydrates are simply an energy source. It fuels your body to function. Just like fat, if we don't burn that fuel, we store it. Here's another interesting thing about carbs is that the TEF on carbs is about 5 to 10%, meaning that if you eat 100 calories of carbs, your net calories after your body processes those carbs is about 90 to 95 calories. So like I said, grains, rice, sweet potato, bread, all that stuff would be examples of pretty clean carbohydrates. You need carbs to live, okay? Carbs are not the devil. Number 3 of the macronutrients is fats. Okay, again, fats like carbs are just an energy source. That's it. There's nothing inherently bad about fat. However, when we eat more than we burn, just like carbs, this is when your body it takes what it doesn't burn and it stores it, because again, it's an incredibly efficient adaptive machine. So you can think of the excessive body fat that you might have as unused fuel, right? Now here's the interesting thing. The TEF, the thermal effect of fat, is about 0 to 3%, right? So that means that if you eat 100 calories of fat, your net calories are about 97 to 100 calories. So fats are really efficient, meaning your body doesn't require to burn much energy processing it. So examples of fats are butter, avocado, oils, nuts, mayo, cream, like all that creamy, buttery, oily stuff. Those are fats, right? Carbohydrates are sugary, sweet. So the two things you want to remember about these macros is, number one, prioritize protein above all three, okay? If you've got anything on your plate that you need to prioritize, it's eating the protein. And then carbs and fats aren't the enemy, right? Carbs and fats are simply fuel. You just need to eat the right amount of them. So here's how you can calculate how much you need to consume a day. You can go online, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes below, but you can find an online calorie calculator. There's lots of them, and they're free. So you just go in, you put in your age, your weight, you put in your activity level, and then it spits out how many calories you should be consuming for weight gain or weight loss or weight management. So now we've talked about the struggle. We've talked about the science behind it. Now we're going to talk about the strategy, okay? I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can control your calories and get yourself into a bit of a slight caloric deficit so that you can start losing weight. While I'm on this, while I'm thinking about this, a really healthy rate of losing weight is about 1 pound per week. Okay, if you're here and you've tried fad diets, if somebody has said to you, you can lose, 100 pounds in 90 days, trust me, it is unhealthy. It is not sustainable. If you can lose 4 pounds per month, that is perfect. All right, 3 pounds per month is good. Okay, so realistically, losing 12 pounds in 3 months is an awesome goal. Any more than that, and you're in a bit of too much of a deficit, and you're in danger of maybe binging or falling off because you're just in too big of a deficit. So when you're thinking about calculating weight loss, give yourself a break, okay? This is a marathon, not a sprint. 1 pound per week. Like I said, weigh in the times we've suggested. Get the average of your weight per week, and then track it over the course of months, not days, okay? All right, the strategy. The 3 different ways that you can control your calories and lose weight or lose fat. Now, as the saying goes, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Just like in finances, in our relationships, there's many ways to do one thing. But the trick here is to find out what's best for you, okay? Remember, the key here is sustainability. So forget the fads, the 75 hard, the fat loss pills, the fat burners, all that stuff. You need to just simply adopt a system that works for you, something that you can maintain and sustain. You do not do anything that you can't do for the rest of your life. That's what I tell people I work with all the time. If you can't see yourself doing this 5 years from now, do not do it, because the point of all this is life change. Okay, something that you can just adopt. So here are the 4 different ways. Here are the 3 different ways that you can explore to get your calories under control. Number 1, and the most efficient by far, is tracking your calories. Use that online calculator to determine how many calories you should consume per day for your goal. So if your goal is weight loss, your goal is weight management, your goal is weight gain, calculate that. And now you have your daily caloric limit. So for example, for me, I know that 2,200 calories is my baseline. If I can stay under 2,200 calories, I'm pretty good with working out 4 times a week. Now, if I'm hitting 1,900 calories, I'm in a 300 calorie deficit, which means I know that I'm going to lose fat if I'm maintaining that kind of caloric deficit. But now here's the important part. you can think about your daily calories, but you can also take your daily calories and times them by 7 and track your calories over the course of a week. Now, you just need to know yourself and understand which is going to be better for you. But for me, for example, and here's the way I think about it. You don't spend the exact same amount of money every single day. And so you may also not eat the same amount of calories every single day, because different days you have different events and work things and things come up. So if you say for example, if you had if your caloric goal for the day was 2,500 every day, you times that by 7. Now you have 17,500 calories to consume per week, right? Because we're not robots, and we don't spend the same amount of calories each day, like I said. So it allows you to take a little bit of pressure off, because you may have, some days you might want to eat a little bit leaner. Some days you might overindulge a little bit. But at the end of the day, at the end of the week, if you track it that way, you know that if you're under 17.5, you're good, right? For example, for me, sometimes on the weekends, my mom-in-law comes over, she cooks. So I'm a little leaner on the weekdays, and I loosen up a little bit on the weekends, right? This is kind of the way I do things. And again, this is what works for me, because I'm not going to totally derail my diet on the weekends, because I understand, like I know myself, right? And I'm actually living that way throughout the week with that lens that on the weekend, I'm going to loosen up a little bit. That may not be your case, okay? Now, if you're here and you're thinking, well, that sounds intense, tracking my calories, I'm going to encourage you with this. Everything in life that's important, you track, okay? You cannot manage what you do not measure. You cannot manage what you do not measure, okay? If you're here and, you've been getting out of debt, or you're saving money, you're an investor, whatever the case is, you track your finances, right? You track projects and work, proposals, the company you work for, or if you're an entrepreneur, you track KPIs, you track all that kind of stuff, because it's important to understand. So calories are no different. This is why tracking your calories is not a bad idea. In fact, in my opinion, it's the best idea. Here's 2 apps that you can use that can make this really simple. There's one by Under Armour called MyFitnessPal. You can download this, and it's got a scanning tool, which you can just simply scan the barcode of anything you're eating, and it automatically downloads the nutritional information and uploads it. It's brilliant. You can use that. It's free, and it can tell you your macros, right? Your proteins, your carbs, and your fats as well. The second app is called Carbon app. Now, this is a really great app because it's a paid app, but it actually changes. You can input your weight, and it changes your goals according to your weight. So as you lose weight, it changes your calorie intake and it changes your macros. It's actually incredibly sophisticated, but both apps work really, really well to give you an idea about how much you're eating, okay? The only thing about the Under Armour, the MyFitnessPal app, is that it includes exercise, calories burned. And while in theory that makes sense, we know that our devices, so for example, the MyFitnessPal app, if I go for a run and my watch says I burned 500 calories on my run, it will upload that to the app, and it'll say, okay, well, you burned 500 calories. So then the app kind of says, well, you have an additional 500 calories to work with. I don't like that, because for me, it's hard, because then I say, well, I earned 500 more calories. Then I'm going to be more susceptible to go eat a donut or have that extra thing because I burned the calories. Another reason why that's tricky is because our devices, phones, smartwatches, all that stuff, Fitbits, have known to be anywhere between 20 to 80% inefficient when it comes to tracking actual calories burned. So if you go in a weight training session, there's been times where my watch said I burned like 600 calories. That is absolutely not true. They're not accurate. So if that's going to be something that derails you, then don't even connect a fitness device to your MyFitnessPal app, because you don't want that to be misreported. And then if you're like me, you're just going to use that as an excuse to eat more. But those 2 software platforms are fantastic when it comes to tracking your calories. So do the online calculator, right? Get how much calories you need per day to lose however much weight you want to lose. Input your age, your weight, your activity level, all that stuff. Download an app and start tracking your food. That is the most simple and the most effective way, undisputed, okay, All right, this number one, tracking your calories. Number two is this concept of intermittent fasting. I'm going to say this right off the get-go. There is nothing special about intermittent fasting, okay? Again, on social media or wherever, you see people just talking about the results that they got through intermittent fasting, and it can be sort of proposed as a magic bullet, if you will. But all intermittent fasting is a simple way of more caloric restriction, which is essentially what we've been talking about this entire episode. Limiting or restricting or lessening your calories, right? Now, it's not as effective as tracking your calories, but it's simpler and requires a little less time. Now, what is intermittent fasting? Well, you simply reduce your feeding window in a day by fasting for a portion of that day. If you normally eat 3 times a day and you begin skipping a meal, you're instantly cutting out 33% of your daily calories. Now, most people who intermittently fast choose to skip breakfast as they're busy getting everything ready, getting the kids out the door, getting ready for work. And some people don't necessarily find that they're that hungry first thing in the morning. There's lots of different ways that you can intermittent fast, right? So there's 3 popular windows of time that you can use when you're planning on intermittent fasting. The first one is 16-8. Okay, in this method, you fast for 16 hours and you have an 8-hour feeding window. And this is the most common time frame. So for example, you skip breakfast at 8 a.m. and you only eat lunch and dinner. You start eating at noon and you're done eating by 6 p.m. Then you have nothing but water and other no-calorie drinks after 6 p.m. So from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. the next day, you eat nothing. Now, this plan works well because your feeding window is large enough to get the protein portions you will need to maintain and grow muscle. That's the challenging thing, is your feeding window needs to be large enough that you can get, the amount of protein that you need. So for example, if you're 160 pounds and you need to get 130, 140 grams of protein per day, it's going to be really hard to get that in a really small time. So 8 hours is enough time to disperse, your meals and your protein intake throughout that 8-hour window. So we've got tracking your calories, which is the most effective, a little bit more of a learning curve. Then the second one is intermittent fasting, which is not as effective. There's less known when it comes to intermittent fasting. You're not tracking your calories, so you don't know exactly what you're eating, when you're eating it. But it is a simple way of reducing calories. And the third way is low fat or low carb, right? So we're going to talk about low fat. So when you remember, we talked about macros. Well, this method is simply to reduce your fat intake significantly. This, like all the others, will reduce your overall calorie consumption. And this is good for people who don't really crave fatty foods naturally, but not good for people who really enjoy eating fatty foods. So for example, if you're listening to this and you really, really love like cheesy, creamy things, mayo, butter, all that bacon, all that kind of stuff, this plan might be a challenge for you, as it restricts fat more than carbs and protein, right? The other option is low carb, right? So it's the other side of this coin, because remember, fats and carbs are fuels. And so you don't necessarily always need both or a lot of both. You can reduce one or the other, and they can help you lower your calories and manage your fuel consumption. So the low carb option, this is plainly, again, just like the fats, it's simply reducing your carb intake. Just like fats, if you really enjoy carbs, this is not necessarily a great idea to go on a low carb diet, because you could binge and crash and all that stuff. But if you don't mind cutting out carbs because you're more drawn to fats, then this can be a great option for you. However, you need to think about this. Do you love things like pasta, breads, rice, sugary beverages, sweets? If so, going on a restrictive, like a carbohydrate restrictive diet may not be a great option for you, but that's a decision you need to make for yourself. So in summary, we've got tracking your calories, doing an online calculator tool, and using the tracking apps that I talked about. You got intermittent fasting, and you can choose whichever window you want, or a low fat or low carb approach to your diet. Now remember, like I said, there is no best way or no one way for everybody. Okay, the best way is the one that you will do consistently, because consistency is key to all of this. All right, the key is to consume less calories than you burn. Now, in thinking what you should eat and what you could eat, I could simply do like a 6-part series on this one thing. But one of the most significant and impacting things you can do is simply clean up your diet and remove ultra-processed foods. I'm just going to park here for a moment because I think it's going to, given some definition and bringing some clarity, this is going to help you, and then we'll move on. But when you're wondering, what should I eat? We live in a culture that is riddled with confusing messages. When you go to the grocery store, you see low fat, low carb, high protein, low sugar, plastered on everything. And it can be so difficult to know what to eat, right? We can become paralyzed by it all. When you think about it like this, when you go to the grocery store, all the things that maybe you should be avoiding, like all the things in the aisle, another general principle is I try and stay out of the aisles. If you go around the outside, that's where you're going to get more of the whole healthy foods. Like you think about it, your produce, your meats, your grains, all that stuff is all on the outside of the grocery store. So if you avoid the inner aisles, then you're probably going to be not led too far astray. But the irony of all this is the fact that it's all of the ultra-processed foods that are in the aisles, the frozen foods packed full of preservatives. They're the ones with all of the branding on it that says, low fat, low carb, high protein, whole whatever, all the advertising and millions and billions of dollars go into marketing these products, when in fact the cleanest, most whole, healthy food you should be eating, like the produce, meat, has no branding on it. I mean, when was the last time you picked up a stalk of broccoli or a pepper and saw some big marketing thing wrapped around it? No, you don't, because farmers don't have budget for that. And so good food doesn't need to be marketed, right? It doesn't need to tell you that you need to eat it. However, because of this discrepancy, people because they don't necessarily understand the rules, they don't necessarily know the details, they're drawn to a lot of these ultra processed foods, which has all the great branding on it. So no wonder people get confused, right? So this is why I've created some really simple rules and ideas for you to follow when choosing what to eat. Because as you learned, your fuel is everything. The quality of the calories you take in are so important. It can allow you to live a healthy life or one that's riddled with chronic illness, heart disease, and many other physical challenges. Before we get into that, though, we're going to talk about the two different types of foods: whole food versus ultra-processed food. And I say ultra-processed foods because almost everything we eat today is minimally processed. So for example, ground beef is processed to an extent. Cheese is processed. Now, is it ultra-processed? No. But this is an important topic because, as I said, it can be confusing for the average person. So let me explain what both of these are if you're not sure exactly. So you can think of many whole foods as being single ingredient foods. Now, this is not the case for all the whole foods, but it's a great place to start. So as I said, for example, fruits, vegetables, meats, cucumber, pepper, lettuce, apples, grapes, chicken, beef. I mean, these are single ingredient foods. Whole foods don't have really chemicals or any products added to them to make them food, right? Now, what are processed foods or ultra processed foods? They are simply the opposite of whole foods, right? They are the foods that have been cut and spliced and modified with other unnatural ingredients to be made. For example, Cheese Whiz is a great example of an ultra-processed food. Did you know that Cheese Whiz is actually gray in color before they put the yellow food coloring additive in it, which is kind of makes you think about what you're eating, right? It's basically cheesy plastic. Other examples are fast food, sugary breakfast cereal, soda, instant soup, a lot of these different things. If you want to get even more confused, let's use the example of the Beyond Meat or the Impossible plant-based burger. Now, I know I'm going to trigger some of you by listening to this, but these burgers are marketed solely on the fact that it's healthy, yet it's packed with bonding agents and chemicals that you can only find in a lab to hold this plant product together. So in order to be able to sort through all this noise when deciding to buy food at the grocery store, here are a couple good general principles to consider when you're buying food, all right? Number one, if you can't produce the ingredients on the list, don't eat it, right? This is a simple rule to keep your pantry clean of processed foods. Instead of having frozen pizza, for example, packed with preservatives to ensure freshness, and store-bought French fries, right? Make the pizza at home with real dough and fresh ingredients. Cut the fries up from real potatoes and use salt, pepper, and olive oil to bake it, right? It's a simple way that you can still have, your fun food, if you will, but make sure that it's made from whole ingredients. Number 2, if you can't reproduce this at home, then don't eat it. Now, what I mean is if you need to go to a local science lab to get the chemicals and additives required to make this product, then perhaps you should consider if you should be eating it. Now, in saying that, I think it's important for us all to just recognize and agree that it's impossible to eat 100% clean 100% of the time, right? 100% full, 100% whole food in our world today, as almost everything has some form of processing. But it's I remember that 80-20 rule, right? It's a good goal to aim for 80% of your diet to be as whole foods as possible. Like there are some really good foods that are minimally processed, like ground meat is processed, oatmeal is minimally processed. And another interesting reason to avoid eating processed food is that it makes people spontaneously want to eat more. Now, it's really interesting. Dr. Kevin Hall designed a study around this a few years ago where they took people and they gave them a minimally processed food diet and a mixture of, whole foods. And then they had another group where they gave them access to the ultra processed foods. Okay. And then the second group that had access to the highly processed foods, they just said, hey, you can eat this until you feel satisfied, right? Eat these processed foods. And that they discovered that the subjects who began eating ultra processed foods spontaneously increased their calories by 500 more calories per day. For most people, that's a 20% increase in daily calories. This isn't just random, this is scientific studies that, these people increase their calories spontaneously by 20% simply by eating ultra processed foods because they had better mouthfeel, they were less satiating, of course, all those different things that come with these foods. So that's a little bit about the difference between whole foods and processed foods or ultra processed foods, for example. When you're going to pick up your groceries at the grocery store, it's a good thing to consider, right? The more whole foods you can eat, generally, the less calories you consume, the more satiated you are going to feel, the better your digestive system is going to feel. So far we talked about the struggle, we've talked about the science, and we've talked about the strategy, okay? And just as we end up this section on strategy, you've heard me quote this before, but it's crazy how many people gain the weight back after they lose it. Something like 95% of the people that lose 40 pounds or more within 2 years gain it all back and then some. We see this all the time with people who do gastric bypass or lap band surgeries. And the reason why they gain it back is because they haven't changed their behaviors. They haven't changed their environments. They haven't changed their mindset. And so it's really, really sad actually how this happens. And so I've observed this in my own life and asked myself why this keeps happening. Here are some things that I know psychologically have helped me, but statistically have helped many other people, the 5% who keep the weight off. Number one is that they change their community. If you're overweight and you're struggling with weight management and you're surrounded by people who are also struggling with overeating and also struggling with this, then the chances of you making better decisions with your diet are much less likely statistically. You need to change your circle and get around some people who are making good decisions, who are at a healthy body fat percentage, who have a healthy relationship with food, who don't necessarily have a struggle with emotional eating. And it's, think about some of the people in your life. Just simply do a thought exercise and ask, in my life, who seems to have a great control over their diet and their exercise? Who seems to struggle least in this area? Call them up and say, hey, I'd love to have a coffee with you sometime. Have the humility to have the conversation with somebody. If it matters to you that much, it'll be important and it's going to be worth it to have that conversation. So change your community. Number two, change your commitments. So here's what happens. We set this big, audacious goal. And again, and I'm saying this because I've been there, and we meet the goal, but we don't have anything planned for after we meet that goal. So what happens? We get down to that benchmark weight. We pat ourselves on the back. And then we have no system for follow-up on when after this goal is achieved. So what happens? We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our disciplines. And if we haven't changed our disciplines, then we get to our goal, and then we revert right back to our old eating habits. I mean, I did this for years. And so one simple thing that I've done in the past is and I still do this now, I will always have a fitness goal in place before my next goal has come to fruition. So for example, we're going to Portugal, in the summer. And I'm thinking about that, and it's making me be mindful about how much I'm exercising and how much I'm eating and weight management, because I want to be, I want to cut down a little bit. Even before I get that's still a couple months out, but I've already set another fitness goal for later on in the end of August, which is the Spartan race, right? And that's my rule. I've always got another goal ahead of the goal that's immediately in front of me. This makes sure that by the time I finish my first goal, I don't fall off the track, because I've got another goal waiting in the bank that I'm shooting for, right? But after that, I've got nothing. So I'm going to have to set up a goal for the winter. By December, maybe there's something coming up, or maybe there's something that I can do so that by the time I finish my Spartan race, I don't fall back. I have something else to look forward to. So this idea of being proactive and thinking forward, like always being 2 steps ahead so that you don't fall off the wagon, so to speak. And the last thing is, you need to remember that this is not a season, all right? This is not a fad. This is not a specific time frame. This is for the rest of your life. You have to connect with something deeper inside of you, right? So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that sounds exhausting to be thinking about what I'm eating and to exercising for the rest of my life, well, that's not a bad thing, you guys, right? So think about it in your finances. If you're listening to this and you have a budget, or if you're concerned about your financial future, finances are something that you have to pay attention to, right? Your investment portfolio, your savings, all those different things. You don't just check on your finances once when you turn 25 and never think about it again. I mean, it's probably a monthly thing. You don't work on your marriage for 3 months and then quit, and then marriage just happens on autopilot. Of course not. You're constantly checking in with your wife. You're constantly growing your skills, paying attention to your marriage, making sure that you're growing together instead of growing apart. And so the things that matter to us most require constant attention. Fitness should be no different. If your physical health and your physical, your fat percentage, if you're feeling overweight and insecure, unhealthy, you can't keep up with playing with the kids or whatever the case is, that's important, okay? And it's okay to track your calories. It's okay to think through this and to pay attention to it, to weigh in twice a week or even every day. I do this all the time, and I've accepted that I will do it for the rest of my life because my fitness is a priority. This is not a season. I'm going to run with my son. I'm going to be there when he has kids, Lord willing. But if I can control it within my, limitations and my health, I will do everything I can to be the healthiest man I can, so that I'm being a great model for my son and to be a great model for my grandkids one day. So think about the long game. Now, this has been a lot about how to lose fat, which is great and will leave you looking leaner and slender. But there's a whole other side to this equation that when it comes to building muscle. And if you want to know about how to do that, reach out to me. And also, if you're listening to this and you don't necessarily know, this has been a lot of information and you don't necessarily feel like you can do this on your own, feel free to reach out to me. I work with men all the time, coaching them on their fitness. We talk about diet, we talk about nutrition, we talk about supplements, we talk about exercise routines to get you exactly to the place where you want to be. Okay, it is a science, and I can certainly help you with that. If you're listening to this and you feel that that's what will be good for you, please reach out to me. I have some openings for coaching clients when it comes to that as well. Because as you've heard, I've got some opinions about this. I've done it myself. I've taught other men how to do it. I've seen the results time and time again. So I'm happy to serve you any way I can to see you get the results that you want for yourself and your future as well. So that's all for me. This has been, I don't even know how long we've been here. All right. I'm afraid to end this because I don't even know how many minutes this has been. But honestly, it's important. So I don't mind going over some time because this is critical information that can change your life forever. That can change the trajectory of your life, your marriage, your family. Because once you get your health in order, listen, the whole family wins, right? You hear me say this every weekend. If you're on YouTube, let me know the big takeaway, okay? What stuck out to you out of all this stuff that you heard? What was like an aha moment where you're like, oh, that's it. That's what I've been missing, or I didn't know. Let's start the conversation on YouTube, okay? I'm down to chat always. I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve you. And listen, I am in your corner. Okay, listen, we got some incredible interviews coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks, as I've been saying. It is not over yet, my friends. So stay tuned. If you don't already follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever streaming platform you're listening to, follow the show because you don't want to miss these new episodes that are going to be coming out. If you listen on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. And hey, if this podcast is resonating with you, if you're taking nuggets home from this and it's adding value to your life, would you consider giving this a rating, an honest review and a rating on whatever platform you're listening on? And even, you know what, if you want to take it to the next level, send this to a brother of yours that you feel like would really benefit from this, because the goal here is to help as many men, husbands, fathers as possible to change the trajectory of their lives and their children forever. This is why we're here, okay? So, hey, thank you so much for listening. Let's get after it this week. Let's make it count, okay? We'll talk soon.